next time we win power, we're going to drive that car like we stole it. We're going to legalize every dreamer's parents, every hardworking American doing backbreaking work that makes this country so goddamn great in the first place, even greater as U.S. citizens.
Fairness of congressional maps gives your state an F. Common Cause, a nonpartisan government watchdog, even says your map, and I'm going to quote, represents a nearly perfect model for everything that can go wrong with redistricting. And I guess the question is, you talk about preserving democracy. How do you preserve democracy if you're using the same tactics that you've criticized Texas Republicans for?
But as I say, what they're talking about is a distraction. The reality is that the violation of people's voting rights is what Texas is attempting to do. That's what's wrong with their efforts right now. And the fact that the president of the United States knows it and nevertheless is asking them to do it. That is what's wrong with what we're seeing right now. Democracy is at stake.
Finally, I've been waiting for the liberal media to finally confront J.B. Pritzker with this question. And I appreciate Kristen Welker. This is the kind of journalism that I want to see. I want to see consistent application of criticism, right? Hypothetical framings. If you're going to have a negative framing against Republicans, I expect the same kind of consistency with Democrats. I think that's what all Americans are just asking for some damn consistency. If you're going to softball a Democrat, I should be able to pull up examples of you softballing Republicans. But if you say we're fair, we're equal opportunists, we're highly critical of power, I expect that highly criticism to be applied to both sides. And Kristen Welker is doing exactly that. Some people are even shocked that she's confronting J.B. Pritzker on this. But I don't find it surprising because right now, Democrats are not popular. 28% of Americans perceive Democrats as a good party, right? Majority of Americans don't like the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is less popular than the Republican Party. So it will make no sense to give disproportional positive coverage to the Democratic Party right now without looking partisan, by the way. But I show you a clip of Beto O'Rourke saying the next time they win power, he's going to drive that car like they stole it. They're going to amnesty a bunch of illegals. I already told you, this is all just political. He ain't doing this, or that's no payback. As you saw from the clip, this is no payback. The Democrats been doing this for a long, long time, and now they're pretending to be outraged over the Texas thing when Kristen Welker confronted it clearly. Hey, you already done what you're blaming or getting mad at the Texas Republicans for doing. You already have done it. So doesn't this look hypocritical? Oh, we don't care. We're trying to protect democracy, aka protect our power. That's what the Democrats has always been about. You do something 3 years ago, 2 years ago, Texas Republicans decided to do the same thing because you've been doing it for a while. You had institutional power for 40 years. And now you're going to use the fact that they're giving you payback. You're going to escalate it.
Here's how National Review summarized it. They said it was only 3 years ago that New York's Democratic legislature drew up a map so brazenly contemptuous of basic rules that govern a district's contiguousness that the state's Democrat-dominated Court of Appeals threw it out. The New York Times at the time called those maps comically contorted. That's their quote. So your state's highest court at the time, all the judges appointed by Democratic governors, they threw the maps out. So fair to say Democrats have done what they're now accusing Republicans of doing.
No, we followed the rules. We do it every 10 years. We base it on census.
But the court said you didn't follow the rules.
Well, we did follow the rules.
So the court was wrong?
Well, we followed the rules.
That he wants more work or new work on a new census.
Yes.
How does that change the GOP makeup and the electoral votes?
Yeah, so another crazy thing that I had no idea about, but everybody, even Democrats actually admit this, that the census in 2020 had a major statistical error. And what that meant is that you actually undercounted a few states that are Republican, like Florida and Ohio. You overcounted some blue states. And so what I understand, if you actually did the census anew right now, you would have 10 additional Republican seats and 9 fewer Democrat seats. And really what we're living with, Maria, is the consequence of 40 years of institutional control in the Democratic Party. These guys have fought very dirty for a very long time, and they haven't just won elections and enacted laws that we may not agree with. They have tried to rig the game for Democrats and against Republicans. And thankfully, under President Trump's leadership, you finally see some spine. You finally see some backbone in the Republican Party to fight back against these very aggressive Democratic dirty tricks. But the only way for us to do it is to actually go and do the hard work to reset the scales a little bit. What we want to do is redo the census, but importantly, we want to redistrict some of these red states, and we want to make the congressional apportionment fair in this country. Again, you cannot do it unless Republicans actually take some very decisive action in the months to come. We think they will, and we're obviously supporting them every step of the way.
So with all that in the background, Democrats still think they got the right on this. And I think this gerrymandering thing, whole kind of stitch that the Texas Democrats did, it backfired completely on the entire party nationally, because people are saying, okay, you're getting mad at Texas. Have you done something before? And with J.D. Vance pointed out, hey, 40 years of institutional power, you guys even admitted that 2020 was a statistical mistake. Let's recount the census, all this stuff. They don't want to correct the record because they understand that the current flaw of the record, right, counting illegals as part of the census, allowing illegals or non-citizens to vote in local elections, that stuff helps them politically, helps the Democratic Party politically. And if you do set the thing into fairness, hey, let's only count American citizens, which 70% plus Americans agree with this sentiment. Let's not allow illegals to vote in our local or state or national elections. Majority of Americans agree with that because of the proof of ID. We need a proof of citizenship before you can allow to vote and influence our government. These are things that many Americans see as, yes, that makes sense. But when it's time to put pen to paper, when it's time to sign those things into place, Democrats never want to sign it. Why? Because they know they gain an advantage by counting illegals as part of the census, allowing illegals to vote in our election, actually foreigners, foreign-born people who don't have American citizenship to vote in our elections. This is why they don't like proof of anything. They don't even want a proof of a driver's license, right? Because Democrats benefit from it. This is purely political. So when they try to play this stick, and this is why I never fall for it, when they try to play this stick of, we're trying to protect democracy, I'm like, you full of ish. Stop it. Get some help. Come on. We know you ain't you ain't trying to say no democracy. Because if you're really trying to say democracy, you want proof of citizenship. If you really was trying to say democracy, you wouldn't allow foreign-born people who don't have citizenship to influence our election in any way if you wanted democracy, right? And we're not a democracy, we're a republic. And asking for proof of citizenship is a proof of republicanism. When you're a republic, only a certain group of people are allowed to vote in the system. It's not a pure democracy. And Democrats are trying to make it a pure democracy when we are a republic. That's the difference between a democracy and a republic. In a democracy, anyone living in there could just vote because they're part of the residency. But in a republic, it's like, hey, only a certain class of people are allowed to vote. And that class is, are you an American citizen? Only you're allowed to influence the election. Remember, the start of this nation, only people who own property was allowed to vote. That was a small percentage of people. And then we expanded that to other classes. But I think as a conservative, we're the border. Hey, right here, we stop right here. Only Americans can vote in this country. That's it. Now, don't be going around like you pulling people from Guatemala and they come over here and then they start voting a certain way because it benefits your party, Democrats. And that's all this is. But I digress. I think I want to watch more of the Kristen Welker interview, and we'll get into it throughout with my commentary. Let's take a look.
I do want to look at the map of Illinois. Let's take a look at this. Despite President Trump winning 44% of the statewide vote in 2024, Republicans hold only 3 of Illinois' 17 districts. These districts seem to be designed to maximize Democratic advantage. What do you say to those who argue that it's hypocritical for you to criticize Texas for partisanship when your state also drew maps to boost your party's standing?
Well, remember that what Texas is trying to do is, again, violate the Voting Rights Act. We didn't. We held public hearings, legislative hearings. People attended them. They spoke out. There was a map.
And you did it anyway. And this is how full of ish this is, right? Because during the whole Brandon saga stuff, I covered it, right? You had a lot of people publicly voice that they wanted to stop making Chicago a sanctuary city. And guess what the council in Chicago did? they didn't want to hold a vote for that. That's gerrymandering, right? Isn't that messing with the system? You see public discontent to the point where what? Brandon Johnson's approval rating was in the single digits. You heard that correctly. Single digits. People wanted to remove Chicago as a sanctuary city, and the Democratic Council decided they didn't want to hold a vote. So J.D. Pritzker is trying to mask that. Oh, we held the public. We did it differently than the Republicans. This is why we're so mad. This is why we're able to criticize them. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if Republicans came to these hearings and say, "Hey, we don't want these maps." You would have done it anyway. You just pushed through it anyway. And I have an example with Brandon Johnson with the sanctuary city status. Residents was calling for him to cast a vote on it so they can vote on the resolution on whether or not to keep Chicago a sanctuary city, and the council decided not to hold the vote. So I don't care about these useless platitudes or this feigning fairness. The outcome isn't fair. That's the point. But I digress. Let's continue.
That was put out. There were actually changes made to the map. And a map was passed, and it was done at the end of the census, the decennial census. So that's how it's done in this country. You talked about how rare it is to do what he's doing. Yes, it is. What's even rarer is to do it at the behest of the President of the United States, who's clearly attempting to and says that he deserves to have 5 more seats. He's wrong, and he's...
But this is a mischaracterization of the argument. The argument is that 2020, there was mistakes made where Florida was supposed to have seats because Florida's population was growing and California's population was declining. And effectively, many people saying you're stealing seats from all these red states that got recently bigger population numbers, right? And you can make the argument, right? Trump can make the argument that, hey, I want to make a legitimate census that makes sense to most Americans. Most Americans believe only Americans should be counted as part of the census. You guys, Democrats, will call that gerrymandering, right? J.D. Vance brought up the history of Democrats' institutional controls to play dirty, as he called it, highlighting how you guys have twisted the census in every conceivable way to gain more leverage in the congressional distribution of the House seats. I gave one tactic, which is the sanctuary city, sanctuary state stuff. You want to bring in all these illegals, give them rights and cash and prizes, allow them to vote in your local elections, effectively funneling in voters across the border to land on your state, to increase your census numbers, to give you more weight on the distribution between how much congressional seats you get. And then you have these processes that you have in your states to draw maps that will maximize how much House seats you get as Democrats. And we know that you guys don't like fairness, right? You don't like to correct these things because right now you gain an advantage from it. If these mistakes was advantaging Texans to the advantage of Republicans, I bet you J.D. Pritzker and the Democrats will vote for, yes, let's only count Americans as part of the census. And this is what I'm talking about with American First. American First. Like, why are you guys spending so much money on illegals if they don't give you any political benefit? $900 million sounds like a lot of money. Chicago's going into debt. Chicago got no money. But Brandon Johnson didn't allow the people to vote on whether or not to maintain Chicago as a sanctuary city. Why? Because he knows that there's a high likely chance that the people would have voted it out, and Chicago would have not been a sanctuary city, which would have smashed and destroyed this whole narrative that the Democratic Party has brought up here in Illinois. And Trump only lost Illinois by 5%. People expected him to lose it by 19%, given the distribution of the congressional seats, but he only lost it by 5%. And as a republic, you're supposed to represent the interests of the people. Hey, you have about 43% of Republicans in that state, 43% of people who voted Republican in that state, yet the distribution is almost 90% for the Democrats in Illinois. Does that sound very representative? No, it's not. And this is the path for power that Democrats, it's so obvious what Democrats want to do here.
To change the game because, again, he passed this big, ugly bill. It's hyper unpopular in Texas, among people in Texas and across the country. And he knows he's going to lose the Congress in 2026. That's why he's going to his allies and hoping that they can save him. And we've all got to stand up against this. This is...
J.D. Pritzker's commentary only works on people who are not paying attention. Democrats are less popular than Donald Trump, period. There's not a single Democrat, J.D. Pritzker, Hakeem Jeffries, there's not a single individual Democrat that's more popular than Donald Trump. The entire party is less popular than the Republican Party. So every time they bring up this notion about unpopularity, they're the worst offenders. Only 28% of Americans look at Democrat in a favorable light. And he's sitting here thinking that they had a good chance. 2026 is Republicans' midterm to lose. No person paying attention actually thinks that Democrats have a good chance 2026. And them running on this amnesty stuff when 57% of Americans want mass deportation, I don't think that's a good thing to push out there, Democrats, but that's just me.
It's cheating. Donald Trump is a cheater. He cheats on his wives. He cheats at golf. And now he's trying to cheat the American people out of their votes.
Well, look, sticking on your state's map, every major group that grades the fairness of congressional maps gives your state an F. Common Cause, a nonpartisan government watchdog, even says your map, and I'm going to quote, represents a nearly perfect model for everything that can go wrong with redistricting. And I guess the question is, you talk about preserving democracy. How do you preserve democracy if you're using the same tactics that you've criticized Texas Republicans for?
But as I say, what they're talking about is a distraction.
No, what you're talking about is a distraction. You don't want to own up to the fact that you're a major hypocrite here. You don't want to own up to the fact that your outrage is centered not on fairness, not on saving democracy, not on some virtual BS that you're trying to present to us on TV. It's all due to political power. That's it. This is your path to political power. This is your path to optimize and dominate politics. And you're mad that Republicans are doing something about it now. And now you got less leverage. Because, Republicans have this claim, and I agree with this claim, that if everything was fair, Democrats will lose. If Democrats could not play dirty, if Democrats couldn't rig certain things to give them an advantage, they will not be winning the way they're winning now. And you see it. Look at their policy. Look at what they push. Someone criticizes you about your map, and all you can come back with is, we're trying to protect democracy. Really? Really? There's no way this party can represent half the country. There's no way Democrats can represent half the country. This is ridiculous. This is some BS. But this is the Democratic Party, right? They live in these blue cities, blue states, right? They don't really interact with people who have diverse political opinions, so they think the entire country thinks like them. And you see it time and time again. They think, oh my God, South Park's going to assault the right wing, and then right wingers across the board are laughing at this stuff. They say, damn, this stuff is actually funny. And now you got on TikTok or something like that, you got Democrats mad that Republicans are not mad about the South Park stuff. This is because liberals project how they feel onto other people and pretend that that's truth. Oh my God, Trump passed an unpopular bill. What poll you referencing? Trust me, bro. The Trust Me Bro poll. That's what the Democrats are referencing. It's baffling to me, but I digress. Shout out to Kristen Welker. I always criticize her. I always been criticizing the liberal media, but I believe this was actually a decent one. All right. Hey, now when she goes at Republicans, I'm not as mad because I saw her do it to a Democrat, at least. But there's my kudos for Kristen Welker. I think if the liberal media can showcase more of this, I think many people will start gaining trust in them again. But let me know what you think in the comment section below. I'll be interested to hear what you guys have to say. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Please share this video if you're so inclined. It really does help me out in the algorithm. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.